Hello and welcome to the Business of What's Next. I'm your host, Matthew Ship, and today I'm here with Leo York, founder of Leo Copywriting. This show explores how ambitious leaders cut through the noise, decide what matters, and sets up their business for what's next. Leo, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We're always talking about where the business of what's next, and really I was trying to figure out what's next with my podcast. It was acting up really bizarrely this morning.
Yeah.
No lead in. Assume that's a lot of what I think business owners are going to feel like sometimes when they wake up one morning, you're like, oh gosh, there's more things than I thought there was. Tell us a little bit about Leo Copywriting and some of the stuff that you're doing. I know you have a really unique approach, and we'll get into that as well in the show.
Sure. Yeah. Copy is I was telling somebody this the other day. It's such a broad topic because if you look at writing in general, there are different missions, and that's what defines what that writing is. Like if you're writing to inform, it's nonfiction. If you're writing to entertain, it's fiction. If you're writing to inform about current events, it's journalism. Copy is really just writing to persuade. And so there's dozens, if not hundreds of ways that somebody can be a copywriter. There's blogs, there's social media, there's search engine optimization, just anything that you're exposed to. And everybody's exposed to hundreds of thousands of examples of this per day, which sounds crazy, but if you actually keep track, it's insane how much persuasive language you're exposed to. But my forte is commercial screenplays. And occasionally I'll do other forms of persuasive writing like direct mail. I love actually direct mail. It's a really fun outside the box form of copy. Taglines, brochures, email campaigns, things like that, catalog descriptions. But commercial screenplays for the purpose of being turned into, occasionally radio, but more often streaming and television. That's really my lane.
So commercial screenplay, are you setting up a script for somebody to go through, or is this, when you say screenplay, I automatically think theater a little bit?
Sure. Yeah. The big advantage and disadvantage to writing commercial scripts is it's not 90 pages.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually half a page to 1.5 pages because commercials are much shorter,
Mm-hmm.
but that's also its disadvantage because it's really hard to distill a message down into an extremely short format.
Mm-hmm.
And that I think is one of the most overlooked skill sets when it comes to persuasive language. Is fiction can be as long or as short as a person feels immersed in that world. Nonfiction can be as long or short as it takes to explain something. Journalism can be long or as short as a person can feel engaged learning about a new topic. Copy needs to get your attention immediately and give you whatever that persuasive talking point is, and then let you go on your way.
Okay.
And it's got to be a much shorter medium. But yeah, it follows the exact same rules. I took a screenwriting class, fell in love with the medium, love writing screenplays that are, what you call it, entertaining. But when I learned from reading about Leo Burnett, aka the King of Coffee, I thought, oh my gosh, you can persuade people with this format too. You can write commercials. And that was the aha moment for me when I was starting my business.
Okay. And you've really followed that persuasive language to a unique niche within your writing. You have a term for that. I'd like you to bring that up and tell us a little bit more about what that is.
Yeah. As far as I know, I'm the only evolutionary behavioral copywriter. And I also call it bio branding just because it's a lot shorter than saying what I just said. Yeah, I have a background in biology, and it's always been a lifelong passion. And I've noticed that a lot of businesses, through trial and error or just falling into it and it ends up succeeding, utilize techniques that appeal to the more reptilian and mammalian parts of the human psyche. And I concluded if you actually know ahead of time and you're not using trial and error, you actually know some of these details of how a decision is made from a customer standpoint as an animal and not just as then you can actually use that to your advantage because now you actually know how that process works.
Okay. Can you break down some of the biology of what's behind what makes our minds? And I think we also mentioned you do a lot of this for the food and beverage industry, which food and beverage, drinking food is pretty much centered to us sustaining ourselves. So I'm sure there's a texture layer.
As you can get. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. There's no other food. There's no other product or service that I think caters as
Okay.
much to the more primitive part of a human's mind and behavior as food and
Oh,
beverage.
yeah.
Just the need.
Mhm,
Shelter, less so, because now we have real estate, and it's a little different than trying to sell somebody a
mhm,
campfire in the middle of a rainy
mhm.
field. But food is just universally a primitive thought process. And one way I think of it, and this is actually in the book I'm writing, is that calories are the first currency. Way before we came up with this abstract concept of money, in order to survive, you had to accrue sufficient amount of calories for the day. And that still plays, even though we now live in an era of amazing consumption and
Mhm.
excess, it's still absolutely a factor in how we gauge what we want to eat.
Makes sense. Okay. So now when I say breakdown, no, we all if you've been in a solopreneur or in business for 5 seconds, you know all about the hook.
Uh,
So let's just start from there with something people know. What is the biology behind the hook and and then kind of layer in how that food and bev part really lays into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Most hooks, and I'll probably talk about this a couple of times, really be distilled down into either a carrot or a stick. There's either a positive reinforcement or a negative reinforcement. And nature has developed amazing ways to convey whether something's a carrot or a
Mhm.
stick. And the biggest way, and it's the reason why it's one of the big things you need to figure out when you're working on your branding, your logo, your color scheme, things like that, the things that cause that instantaneous recognition of what your brand
Mhm.
is. There's a reason why it starts with color, and that's because that is the nature's language of saying, this is good for you or this is bad for you. One thing I actually do as just a fun little game slash persuasive technique for clients who don't believe that biology plays such a pivotal role is I will actually show them pictures of just random plants and be like, which one of these do you want to eat?
Mm.
And 9 times out of 10, they pick the healthiest plant and they're very averse to the toxic one. That's not a carte blanche to just go out there and grab whatever food you want from nature because there are toxic plants that do look edible and vice
Yes.
versa. But one of the first colors, for example, that human beings, actually the first color that we evolved to visualize is red.
Mhm.
A lot of animals actually can't see within the red spectrum. A lot of mammals can't and invertebrates, but we can. And one of the reasons for that is because red, we have a really weird relationship with. If something is a dark red, like a plum colored, duller, think of apples, for example, that is an indication from nature. That is a plant telling you this modified plant ovary I've got is chock full of calories, chock full of nutrients. You will enjoy this. And I benefit too because you're going to consume the fruit. And as such, you're probably going to pass the seed somewhere. And I don't have feet and you do. So we both benefit. So that's why I'm marketing this to you. Conversely, crimson or a waxy bright red is indicative of danger. And so that's exactly why stop signs are red and fire trucks are red and all the things that we want to immediately grab someone's attention with are that particular color of red. So using color is just one of the best ways that you can either encourage or discourage a person from buying a product. And we see this with a lot of food industries. Restaurants that are fast food, they use bright colors, red, orange, yellow, to get you to make a customer decision and leave very quickly. Whereas places that want you to sit down and order multiple things, they use duller, more subdued colors. Blue in particular is a very soothing color. And you're going to see that a lot more in sit down restaurants for that reason.
Okay. How do you use that in copywriting?
One of the big ways is whenever I'm writing the script, I always start with what's the visuals of that hook going to be?
Okay.
What are we really going to showcase? And it needs to be in line with both the branding of that
Mhm.
business, and it also needs to be in line with human biology. And very rarely do those conflict. And when they do, I'm always going to default to biology for the hook and then just resonate the branding later on in the commercial. So it's a little more subtle or subconscious and not quite so immediate.
Okay.
But that's rare.
Yeah, okay, it's great. We're gonna get into something else. I really wanna know, like, where when a client comes to you or a company comes to you, a restaurant, for instance, where do you see the leader getting stuck when they're coming to you with the branding? Where's their bottleneck?
A lot of it, it's funny because it's usually universal. It doesn't matter if it's a small, medium, or large business. A lot of it is they have a scope creep where they want to have a specific target market but then they want to expand that,
Mhm.
or they think that everybody's going to be their customer, which is the worst answer you can give, whether you're a startup
Mm.
or $1 million company. And a lot of times that becomes the issue. That becomes the talking point where this isn't broad enough. We want this to be a little more universal. And it's, yeah, but you're selling fast casual burritos. You can't sell that to everybody.
Mm.
You can't encourage people to go in and treat that like a sit down restaurant or like it's a Chinese restaurant. Because you have to be on with 4 burritos. It has to be in line with that. Funny enough, that's not to get off topic. Well, on topic, but a little tangent. One that I love seeing is you go to fast casual places. They often have Chipotle burritos, made me think of it. Their bags are covered with asymmetrical text, loopy, weird words,
Mhm.
just over everything. It's like, why is that? That's biological. If you are in nature and you see a food item like a plant and it's perfect, it's just symmetrical, it does this weird uncanny valley thing where you just know on some level that it's toxic
Mm.
because nothing else is nibbled on it. And as such, asymmetrical things are very unattractive to us when it comes to tech, when it comes to physical beauty, but very attractive when it comes to food. We don't want perfect cube or orb shaped foods.
Wow. That's cool. That's really neat. I did not know that. That's really awesome. And a lot of things you're touching on are more than you're talking even more than the copy. You're really getting into initially the visual cues that we all use.
Yeah.
And as far as like I'm going to steer this back to the business of what's next. When it does, when a business leader is frozen, has their bottleneck, they don't know what's next. They often try to make that decision based on some basic analytics or just some raw gut feel. W- When they finally figure out that's not exactly working, I what I find with when they maybe ask me to help them is again visual. So I do a lot of visual decision making. And it's not
Good.
a lot of like circles and squares. Now, in the biology world, there's a lot of circles and squares. I be a biologist too, and I teach you how to clone a
Yeah.
gene using circles and squares. Again, I'm gonna go back off my tangent.
We had a
You know,
fun chat
tangents here.
about that. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
uh, really is visualizing their strategic decision making usually helps them, and it also helps communicate to the team without having to be overly verbose, which is again copywriting, getting to the point. They can go in and everybody can see what everybody's working on, what everybody's ideas are visually. So it's not being artistic. It's just putting stuff on a sticky note for most lack of better of a term. And collectively everybody's seeing everything. And from there they can see what's important, what's not important, bubble up what's to the top and move forward. You said color, visual, scope creep. These are all the things that happen when you take the creativity out of the analytics.
100%. Yeah. Yeah. You can't, making money is the point of a business, and data is not inherently procedural.
Mhm.
And I think that's the big challenge is your guts and data are both great ways of beginning to make a
Mhm.
decision, but turn that into a procedure. You can't turn guts or data into a
Absolutely,
procedure.
and if you have a small team, they've got a certain amount of buy-in, they're seeing things from different perspectives. Don't isolate yourself. Use the knowledge of the people that you feel are your strongest people, your leaders in your business to
Sure.
put out their expertise, add it to your own, and really see where things are going. You're probably going to learn a lot
Oh,
more than just operating on entrepreneur gut.
yeah. Yeah. That's a big part of it too. That's even worse in the startup space where I call it little red hen syndrome, where people think they can do everything and they don't want to outsource any decision making. And then they wonder why things aren't working out. It's because you've got a lot of smart people around you and you're not actively utilized.
And that is great because I think the next thing we want to talk about is you have some experience working with startups from a program that you are like the vice president of, right?
That's
So talk
right.
about that.
Yeah. We're actually rebranding starting January 1st. So that's our New Year's resolution. But we're currently called Inventors Network Kentucky. And because we're not just Kentucky anymore, we're also helping entrepreneurs. Most of them don't see themselves as inventors. We're rebranding to Acture at the beginning of the year. Same color scheme, same iconography, just slightly different verbiage, but we're a nonprofit that got started in the mid 90s, and it started by the fella actually who co-invented the inkjet
Hmm.
printer. And it was very local.
Mhm.
It was just people in central Kentucky. And as time went on, we started expanding via Zoom and other online modules. We got a live stream on YouTube, for example, called Inventor Friday, and that's reached more people. And it's been a real fun journey because inventors and entrepreneurs are cut from the same cloth, and they tend to have the exact same struggles and difficulties: feature creep, analysis paralysis, what I call curator syndrome, where they want to, when they pitch products or try to get investors, they just talk about how they came up with it rather than the meat and
Yeah, yeah.
potatoes, things like that. So yeah, a lot of these struggles are just super universal.
But talk about some of those. What's you mentioned a few. Is it like money, organization, the energy they have? What's their biggest roadblock you see when they're trying to start
All right.
off this idea they have?
Yeah, I think energy is a big part of it. We had a great inventor back in the day. He's retired now, but he had a fantastic phrase, which is you only have so many hustle
Mhm.
points for the week. And so you need to outsource productivity and insource creativity. And I think a lot of founders struggle with that. They have little red hen syndrome. They want to do everything at the outset and then they get burnt out and they don't utilize enough of other people around them. And that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful helping people is we've created like a little iron sharpens iron tribe where people can vent their business struggles and their emotional struggles because those all tie in together and uplift each other. That's the other thing. People think I'm going to be an entrepreneur. And so when I'm working, I'm doing this. And it's, yeah, but your personal life is going to affect how well you do in a given day. Well, you're doing at work, just like when you were an employee.
Alright, so I want everyone to hear this again. Say what you said about outsourcing and insourcing.
Oh, yeah. Outsource productivity, insource creativity.
Feeling stuck as a leader or sense you're out of alignment even though you're pushing forward, you're not alone. Seek Coaching helps leaders cut through the noise and reconnect with their authentic voice. Founder Stephanie Seek uses her 5 V's methodology to help you clarify what matters, reframe limiting beliefs, and bring your inner and outer voice back into alignment. With Seek Coaching, you create the space for clarity, confidence, and a path that actually feels right. Visit seekcoaching.com to take your next intentional step toward balance and purpose. Seek Coaching. Alignment is the new success.
That's not mine. That's lawyer bills, as we call
Okay.
it.
Where do
Yeah.
you see that working in businesses?
Oh, big time when it comes to decision making and things that are outside of a person's field of
Mhm.
expertise. That's a huge part of it where I've met inventors and entrepreneurs who will want to control every element of their business, including like the logistics.
Mhm.
And that's a lot of time and energy. Marketing's a lot of time and energy. All of these things, you can't do all of them.
Mhm.
I highly recommend the entrepreneurs read what is it called? Oh gosh. I hate it when I do that. And I think of a book and dang, we might have to cut that part
Eh,
because I can't think of it.
okay. Okay. So if you think about it later, bring it up. Well,
Forgot it. The
the
E-Myth.
email.
It's
Yes.
always after,
Yes.
yeah, the E-Myth
Yes. I.
because it's about the roles you play and
Mhm.
you can't have all the hats.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally agree with the E-Myth. Yes. That's really as interesting that they can do that. I've found that true for mid-stage businesses as well, and that's what I usually end up calling the founder syndrome at that point.
Right.
So they have been bootstrapping, they have been wearing all the hats, and they even say the right things. I'm like, I need to get rid of these hats. I need to outsource all this stuff. And they're saying all the right things, and you watch them work, and they're still drawing everything back into themselves. And
Yeah.
and it's really hard, even with like visual decision making or strategic decision making. It's really hard to work with that until they can let go of it, because ultimately they're going to draw everything back away from their team into themselves.
Yep.
And most of these teams are on the cusp, these businesses are on the cusp of doing great things. But until the founder can let things go and let people do the things they're not completely their way, but to the best of their ability,
Right.
and it's going to be slightly different. You have to be okay with that. Until they can let go of that and be okay with that, they put themselves in this holding pattern, just looping around and around the same problem constantly and wondering why it isn't being fixed. Yeah, I could go into that for forever, but yeah, I touched on that, and it looks like entrepreneurs can get stuck in that with startups or early ideas the same way.
Yeah. Really, the main difference is bootstrappers in the early stage, they're very much in survival
Mhm.
mode. Whereas once they have a little more breathing room, yeah, they struggle to transition into a more modular way of thinking. I see that also with, I hate seeing this more than anything, is when you've got multiple founders,
Ooh.
partners, and they're in survival mode. So the business takes priority. They're in full agreement on everything because it's two people on a raft. They're not going to argue about what to have for
Mhm.
dinner. They're going to get whatever they can get. And then they get a little breathing room
Mhm.
and now they can be more creative. And that's when all these interpersonal things come to a head on where to take the business.
Interesting.
And yeah, it's always a shame to see the early business divorce, like right after the big success,
Mm.
like the first
Mhm.
hurdle get cleared, because now people can think, now I want to do things this way,
Mhm.
as opposed to what I needed to do just to get off the
I've
ground.
seen that happen with wineries a lot because a lot of successful businessmen will come together, purchase a winery, and have this co-leadership of 3 to 4 people, in fact, investors. And yeah, once they get past that, okay, now we've stabilized it, we have consistent income coming in, then they all go in 12 different directions and
Yeah,
things. Yeah, and it's that one key term. I can't remember who it was I talked to, but it was he said that most businesses fail the year after their most successful year. As it frees
interesting.
up, it takes your eye off the ball, you lose focus on what was really working because you've been working on it so hard and now it's working. You take that deep breath, maybe you took it a little too long. And
Mhm.
yeah, so it's like it was up in the '80s or '90s, businesses
Wow,
fail after their best year.
that is wild. I wouldn't have thought it was that
Yeah.
bad, but yeah, I believe it now that I hear it.
Awesome. Another thing we're gonna get back to, so I wanna tie this together nice and neat. How does your behavioral copywriting work well with the startups and the inventors?
Oh, that's a good point. One thing is human beings are just inherently
Mhm.
social. And I think that a lot of what I'm doing, literally biologically, is retraining people to reject this myth of the lone wolf entrepreneur,
Mhm.
the lone wolf founder who does everything on their own and doesn't rely on a community for anything. It's such a romantic American idea. It's almost like the cowboy idea of just you literally have nothing and you turn it into an empire overnight with zero input from anyone else. And that's not the way human beings are hardwired, though. We are hypersocial. There's a reason why exile was basically a death sentence and usually was used as a death sentence for most in human history because you have to have some level of a tribe. We're very tribal creatures. And another way that I encourage that, actually encourage people's desire to be independent when I am coaching people and I do have multiple founders is encouraging them to create a more modular system where there are exit plans and there is an hierarchy.
Mhm.
And human beings are also naturally very hierarchical. We don't like to think of ourselves that way. We like to think how everything should just run like a republic. It should be like Plato's Republic. And unfortunately, no. If you look at a family, usually there's people making decisions within that family, and the kids aren't as authoritative within that unit. And same thing goes for how a business should run. Somebody should have the last word, and everybody needs to check their ego at the door for that. And that's very easy to do as
Mhm.
animals. It's harder to do as people, just because again, human side of us have bought into a lot of these romantic notions that we can do it all ourselves. And when we collaborate, we can all just throw in our hats equally and it's just going to work out great, which is a good income.
Yes, that's just let's organize chaos and hope for the best.
Yeah.
So that kinda also gets into how does I know they're early inventing, or even if you're regular clients, how does their messaging come into play? The reason I'm asking, this is a little selfish because I think I'm struggling with it, and I'm sure other people are struggling with it.
Sure.
I just recently learned, and I've been struggling with my own messaging, but somebody told me that if you make your message to resonate with somebody, it needs to be costly, urgent, and specific.
Yes.
And
I,
yeah,
yeah.
so
That,
oh,
oh,
okay, so
go for
what advice would you have for somebody who's trying to nail that down? And some people, it's gonna be easy. I am a something that most people know what it is, a
it.
carpenter,
Sure.
a chef. Okay, that's kinda locked in. Now, but really, so are a lot of other people, and so you're still just one of many. How do you make
Yeah.
your message, whether it be specifically what you do or something a little more vague, helping people to make strategic decisions? How do you make that either from coming from either direction? How do you make that more specific in being it costly, urgent, and specific?
Sure. Yeah. I've learned this myself. I've got more clients after years of struggling when I started raising my prices because it was more costly.
Mhm.
So that's one
That's one
right
way to
off
do
the
it, okay,
bat
okay.
because, yeah. And that also comes down to human nature. Just imagine if you were walking down a street and you saw a beautiful high end car and somebody said something to the effect of, yeah, if you save up for a few years, you might be able to buy a car like
Mhm.
this. That's more appealing than if you were walking and somebody whispered to you, "Hey, you want to buy a luxury car?" No, okay. And I see that too, incidentally, with people trying to pick up dates. It's very similar where they lowball themselves by stammering and things like that. And they look like they have low value. And it's the same thing. If you're selling something at a lower than average rate, you are going to get a certain kind of
Mhm.
customer. You're going to get somebody who doesn't care about the quality of that product or service. But if your rates are competitive or higher than competitive, people are going to immediately assume that there is a value to it and that it is worth it. So that's
Mhm.
one. And this all ties back in. I knew this would recur is the carrot and the stick
Mhm.
metaphor. Any kind of call to action with regard to branding should be in some sense time sensitive, and the time sensitive component should have either a negative or a positive element to it. One that I have loved seeing lately, they're getting a little cliche, a little cringy. Maybe it's just because my feed has so much of them, but I love the videos of the monthly subscription things where you get salmon or something delivered to your doorstep, and it shows someone sobbing because they subscribed for that loot box type of product a week after their flash sale and they missed out. They have really bad financial FOMO because they didn't do it now as opposed to
Mhm.
later.
Mhm.
And that's one of the ways that you can have a negative side to what's actually a positive, which is saving money.
Mhm.
You're showcasing the more negative element to it. One thing I prefer to do, and this is just me, but I think in marketing in general, it works better, is I like having act now and get some sort of free swag component,
Okay.
a lengthier consultation or a branding audit, something that sweetens the pot a little bit so that there's more of an impetus to make that decision now. And we see that in the natural world too, when it comes to fruit and things. There's a certain point that's ideal for the plant to spread its seeds. And that's when that apple or what have you looks its best. And you want to get that immediately. You don't want to wait until a worm crawls into it or it starts to get a little brown. There's a time since I never thought about this before. I mentioned that calories are the first currency. Currency, unless there's a war or really bad inflation, is not perishable. There's nothing time sensitive about money. You can hoard
Mhm.
money, but you can't hoard
Mhm.
calories. Calories themselves are very time sensitive. And so we are, in many levels, as an animal, trained to treat resources as a time sensitive thing. And utilizing that in a call to action with your branding is often very helpful. This is very anecdotal, but I'm a tarantula keeper. I flip and love bugs in
All
life.
right.
And there's one particular vendor that I love going to see, even if I don't buy anything, called Fear Not Tarantulas. And one of the reasons is every time there's a special occasion, they have some kind of flash sale. And it's usually just absurd
Mhm.
prices. But one of the reasons why I love that is it's such a great call to action. And I know people who also keep them. And you'll see people bragging about, look at me, I got this Tortocotta Pelosis for $12 instead of 25 for their flash
That's a
sale.
mouthful. Okay.
Yeah. Should have said Dominican curly
There
hair.
you go.
That's the common.
Oh, wow. That's cool. No, that's awesome. And then finally, what about now there's a lot of people talking about that niche being specific, or it's easy for some because again, focus on an industry. Some
Sure.
others, like myself, I focus on a problem. So how would you distinguish? Is it just pick an industry and go with your problem or
I think one of the best ways is to coin a term that distills what you do for the specific
Mhm.
problem and then add a modifier for that industry. And I'm also
Okay.
found I was afraid to be a more specific copywriter for a long
Mhm.
time. My menu even now has a list of things that I don't really do, except maybe 1% of the
Mhm.
time. I should probably clear it out, frankly. But I found that the more niche I
Mhm.
got, the broader my customer base got
Interesting.
because people wanted to know more about it. They wanted to know more what it's
Mhm.
about, how you help people in that industry. And then lo and behold, as you're discussing with them via either your written copy or in person, they start realizing, oh, I'm not in the industry you're after, but I have similar problems. Is there any way you could take a look at X or Y or Z? And that has spiraled out from
Mhm.
there. And that even adds a feeling of exclusivity where it's, oh, this guy, he only helps wineries, but he's helping my brewery out. I feel fortunate to have met somebody who's willing to step outside their comfort zone to help me.
Mm.
There's an element of tribalism there too, where it's like,
Interesting.
I got the town blacksmith to help me make something that's not a horseshoe.
Mhm. Okay, that's great advice. That's really into perspective. Really, so I guess coming down to the end here, what's next for your business?
Ah, yeah, there's the rebrand for helping inventors. And then I'm currently working on a book called Bio Branding. And it's just a way to distill down and show people more passively what I do instead of talking about it all the time.
Yeah,
Because I
that,
do. I love talking about it, but I can't talk to everybody.
yeah, I understand that. All right. And is there any, if people want to find you and the next business comes along and says, hey, I think copywriting's next for my business, where would they find you? Or is there anything going on that they could jump in and see what you do?
The absolute best way to reach me is LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Leo York.
Okay.
I know I got a shaved head and face right now, not that you can see it, but look for the guy with the beard because that's me. And
All right.
I live there, so I'll be very
All
responsive.
right. I feel you. My profile is me without a beard, but it's the best picture I have.
Yeah.
Now,
Right. Gotcha.
there you go.
Well,
All right. I think this has been super valuable. I was wondering, copywriting, that's a lot. That is a big next step for a lot of companies when they find themselves, okay, I've got something I've laid out, or they need to rebrand or say, let's check our messaging. We're not doing as well. And I really love the fact that you brought in the visual pieces into this. You talked more about the visual pieces than about the copy, but that's what influences what you say and how you say it.
100%.
And
That's what leads the eye.
and you find businesses coming to this because of that scope creep, and we've touched on that a lot of times, like going wide, going narrow. I have found in myself networking, when I go narrow, people go wide for me. When I go wide, it actually dissociates, and people can't think
Yes.
of anybody for you. So I've always found
That's
that a very
exactly right.
interesting thing. And again, I really want to reiterate that kind of that limited hustle power. And you say you need to say it again:
Outsource productivity, in-source creativity.
outsource productivity, in-source creativity. That.
I need to send while your bill a gift basket
Yeah,
because, yeah, I paid an
that is
awful
great.
lot.
That is a great piece of advice. I think when people keep that in mind when they're looking for help and how you're looking for help and why you're looking for help. Again, Leo, this has been an awesome conversation. I've really enjoyed this. And again,
Thank you
anybody
too.
out there, if copywriting, messaging is what's next on your list, reach out to Leo, try him out, and try a different approach with I can't remember that evolutionary
Behavioral marketing. No
behavioral
worries.
marketing. Yeah, we'll go with the bio branding.
There
There you
we
go.
go.
All right,
Exactly.
Leo.
Yeah.
Thanks for being on the show. I really appreciate this.
Thanks so much for having
All
me,
right,
man.
bye.
See ya.